Daniel Carter stood at the viewing port of the diplomatic station and stared at the stars beyond. 3 months had passed since humanity first made contact with the galaxy, and he still could not believe he was here. The station orbited a small moon far from Earth, a neutral ground where dozens of alien species met to talk and trade. He was 28 years old, tall and lean, with short brown hair and tired eyes. Before joining the diplomatic service, he had been a soldier. Those were hard years, full of fear and confusion as humanity learned it was not alone in the universe. Some aliens had been friendly. Others had been suspicious. A few had been hostile. Daniel had seen enough fighting to last a lifetime. When his commanders told him he was better suited for talking than shooting, he had been relieved. Now he wore a simple gray uniform with Earth's symbol on the shoulder. He was a lieutenant in the diplomatic corps, which sounded impressive but really meant he did whatever Ambassador Helen Grant told him to do. The door behind him opened. Ambassador Grant walked in, her footsteps sharp on the metal floor. She was in her 50s, with silver hair pulled back tight and a face that rarely smiled. She had been a politician on Earth before taking this job, and it showed in everything she did. "Lieutenant Carter," she said, "we need to talk." Daniel turned from the window. "Yes, ma'am." Grant handed him a data tablet. "The Galactic Council has invited you to participate in a cultural exchange program. It is an honor, but also a test. How we handle this will affect how other species see humanity." Daniel looked at the tablet. Words in a dozen languages scrolled across the screen, translated into English at the bottom. "What kind of exchange?" "You will choose a partner from among the participating alien species. For 1 year, you will learn their culture, language, and customs. They will learn about humanity from you. It is meant to build understanding and trust between civilizations." "Choose a partner?" Daniel frowned. "What does that mean exactly?" Grant's expression did not change. "The Council has arranged for 7 female representatives from different species to be available. You will meet them, speak with them briefly, and select one. That individual will work closely with you for the next year. Think of it as an exchange student program, but with political consequences." Daniel felt his stomach twist. This sounded less like education and more like some kind of arranged relationship. "And if I refuse? Then humanity loses an opportunity to prove we can cooperate with other species. The Council is watching us carefully, Lieutenant. We are new here. We are from a death world. Many species already fear us. We need to show them we can be trusted." He knew she was right. Earth was what the aliens called a heavy gravity world, with dangerous weather, aggressive wildlife, and diseases that could kill most other species. Humans were seen as tough and potentially violent. Every action they took in the galaxy was watched and judged. "When do I meet them?" he asked. "Now," Grant said. "Follow me." They walked through the station's white corridors, passing aliens of various shapes and sizes. Some were tall and thin with too many joints in their arms. Others were short and covered in fur or scales. A few looked almost human, while others were so strange Daniel had trouble understanding what he was seeing. They entered a large hall with a high ceiling. 7 raised platforms were arranged in a circle, each holding a single alien female. Dozens of other aliens sat in seats around the room, watching. Daniel realized this was a public event. Whatever he chose here would be seen by representatives from 30 different civilizations. Ambassador Grant gestured toward the platforms. "Those are the candidates. Take your time. Speak with them if you wish. When you are ready, make your selection." Daniel walked slowly around the circle, trying not to stare. The first platform held a tall being with skin that looked like pale crystal. She was beautiful in an alien way, graceful and delicate. A holographic display beside her showed information about her species, the Valerians. They were traders and merchants, peaceful and wealthy. The second candidate had 4 arms and large black eyes. Her species, the Tethians, were scientists and philosophers. She watched him with calm intelligence. The third was a correlation, her skin shifting colors as he approached. Her people were natural diplomats, able to read emotions and mediate disputes. The fourth was muscular and strong, a Kresh warrior from a culture that valued honor and combat skill. The fifth was a symphonian, her skin covered in patterns that glowed with soft light. Her people were artists and historians, keeping the memories of the galaxy alive through music. The sixth was a forge daughter, stocky and practical, from a species of engineers and builders. Daniel noticed something odd. 6 platforms formed a neat circle, but there was a seventh in the shadows, set slightly apart from the others. He walked toward it. The being standing there was unlike anything he had seen. She was tall and thin, wrapped in a dark cloak that seemed to drink in the light around her. Her skin was deep black, with patterns that might have been scars or natural markings. Her eyes were large and entirely black, no white showing at all. She looked like she belonged in the empty space between stars, not in a bright diplomatic hall. "That is Sarah," Ambassador Grant said quietly, appearing at his elbow. "She is Voidborn." Daniel looked at the information display. The Voidborn were a species that evolved in space itself, in the dark regions between stars. They could survive in vacuum and extreme cold. They could sense electromagnetic fields, including the ones created by thinking brains. They were rare, scattered, and feared by almost every other species in the galaxy. "Why is she here?" Daniel asked. "No one knows," Grant admitted. "The Voidborn never participate in these exchanges." Her registration was a surprise. Most council members think she is making a statement about her species being excluded. No one expects you to actually choose her. Daniel looked around the room. The other 6 candidates stood proud on their platforms, but Sarah remained in the shadows. The other aliens in the audience carefully avoided looking at her. Even the other candidates seemed uncomfortable with her presence. "What happens if I choose her?" he asked. Grant's voice became sharp. "Do not even consider it, Lieutenant. The Voidborn are dangerous. They can read minds. They can manipulate electronic systems with a thought. Treaties with them are nearly impossible because they know when you are lying. Choosing her would be seen as either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid, and I am not sure which would be worse for humanity's reputation." Daniel watched as a young alien diplomat dropped a stack of data tablets. They clattered across the floor. The diplomat bent to pick them up, embarrassed. 6 of the candidates remained on their platforms, pretending not to notice. Sarah moved. She stepped down from her platform and knelt to help gather the tablets. The young diplomat flinched away from her, fear clear in his movements. Sarah's black eyes showed no reaction. She simply picked up the tablets, stacked them carefully, and set them within the diplomat's reach before returning to her platform. No one else had moved to help. No one else had noticed or cared. But Sarah had. Even knowing her help would be feared, rather than welcomed. Daniel looked at the other candidates. They were all giving speeches now, talking about their civilizations and what they could offer humanity. They spoke of trade deals, technology sharing, and political alliances. Their words were practiced and smooth. Sarah said nothing. She stood in the shadows and waited, alone. "You have until the end of this cycle to decide," Ambassador Grant said. "Choose wisely." Daniel nodded slowly, but his eyes remained on the dark figure in the shadows. He thought about his own experience these past 3 months. He remembered the aliens who had refused to shake his hand because humans carried too many germs. He remembered the ones who had avoided him because Earth was too violent, too dangerous. He remembered being the outsider, the one others feared. The galaxy already feared humanity. Maybe it was time to stand with someone else the galaxy feared, and see what happened when 2 outsiders decided to trust each other. The selection ceremony began 2 hours later. Daniel stood in the center of the Great Hall, while representatives from 30 civilizations watched from the surrounding seats. The 7 candidates remained on their platforms, each one representing a different path humanity could take in the galaxy. Ambassador Grant stood beside the council podium, her face carefully neutral. But Daniel could see the tension in her shoulders. She expected him to choose the Valerian or perhaps the Tethian. Safe choices, smart choices. A tall alien with multiple arms stepped forward. This was Minister Vex, one of the senior council members. He spoke in a language Daniel did not understand, but a translator device on his collar converted the words to English. Lieutenant Daniel Carter of Earth, Minister Vex said. You have observed the candidates. The choice you make today will bind your species to theirs in cultural exchange. Choose with wisdom and care. Daniel walked slowly around the circle. He stopped at each platform and spoke briefly with each candidate. The Valerian told him about crystal cities and trade routes spanning the galaxy. The Tethian described libraries containing millions of years of knowledge. The Correlation spoke of peace and understanding. The Kresh talked of honor and strength. The Symphonian offered music that could make stars weep. The Forge Daughter promised technology beyond Earth's dreams. Each offer was generous. Each candidate was impressive. Daniel thanked them all sincerely. Then he walked to the 7th platform, the one in the shadows. Sira stood motionless, her black eyes watching him approach. The hall went quiet. Even the translator devices seemed to stop humming. Daniel stopped in front of her platform and extended his hand. I choose you, he said clearly. For 3 full seconds, no one moved. No one spoke. The silence was absolute. Then, the hall erupted. Aliens spoke in dozens of languages at once, their translator devices creating a wall of confused sound. Some voices were shocked. Others were angry. A few sounded approving, but not many. Sarah stared at his extended hand. Her black eyes were impossible to read. Why? She asked. Her voice was strange, like wind through empty spaces, but the words were clear. Why would you choose me? Why? Why would you choose me? Because you were the only one who helped when someone needed it, Daniel said simply. You did not ask for thanks or recognition. You just did what was right. Ah. Sarah looked at his hand for another long moment. Then, slowly, she reached out and took it. Her fingers were cold. Colder than anything Daniel had ever touched. It was like holding ice that would never melt. The hall exploded with noise again. Ambassador Grant's face had gone pale. Minister Vex raised his arms for silence, but it took several minutes before the crowd calmed enough for him to speak. The choice is made, Minister Vex announced. Lieutenant Carter of Earth has selected Sira of the Voidborn. The cultural exchange will proceed according to council protocols. The ceremony ended in chaos. Diplomats rushed to speak with their own delegations. Ambassador Grant was immediately surrounded by other human officials. All talking at once, Daniel caught fragments of their conversation. Words like reckless and dangerous and what was he thinking drifted through the noise. A young alien who looked vaguely reptilian approached Daniel. He wore the uniform of the diplomatic corps with Earth's symbol on it. This was Commander Jake Morrison, another human officer who had been selected for the exchange program. That took guts, Jake said, keeping his voice low. I chose the Kresh warrior. Everyone said that was a bold choice. But you just made mine look safe. Did I make a mistake? Daniel asked. Jake glanced at Sira, who stood silent and apart from the crowd. I do not know. But I know what it feels like to be judged for where you come from. Humans are death-worlders. Half the species here think we are violent primitives who got lucky finding faster-than-light travel. If we start judging others the same way they judge us, what does that make us? Daniel felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. At least one person understood. Ambassador Grant finally broke free from the other diplomats and walked over. Her face was carefully controlled, but her eyes were hard. My office. Now, Daniel followed her through the corridors to a small private room. The door sealed behind them with a soft hiss. What were you thinking? Grant demanded. Do you have any idea what you just did? I chose a partner for the cultural exchange, Daniel said. Like you told me to. I told you to choose wisely. The Voidborn can read minds, Lieutenant. Every thought in your head, every secret you know about Earth's defenses, our technology, our weaknesses. She will know all of it. She said it does not work that way. Grant's expression turned sharp. When did she tell you that? Just now, as we walked to our assigned quarters. She explained that she senses electromagnetic fields, including the ones created by neural activity. But it is not mind reading. It is more like sensing emotions and intent. Like how humans read body language. But deeper. And you believe her? Daniel met her eyes. Yes. Grant was quiet for a moment. Then she sat down heavily in a chair. The council is already discussing whether to allow this exchange to continue. The Voidborn have never participated before. There are old treaties that restrict their access to certain areas because of their abilities. Some species refuse to negotiate with them at all. Then maybe it is time that changed, Daniel said. This is not about what should be, Lieutenant. This is about what is. The galaxy runs on fear and suspicion. Species stay in their own territories, form their own alliances, and avoid those they do not understand. That is how peace is maintained. That is not peace, Daniel said quietly. That is just everyone staying afraid in their own corners. Humans know what it is like to be feared. We are new here, and half the galaxy thinks we are dangerous. If we start treating others the way they treat us, we become part of the problem. Grant looked at him for a long moment. Finally, she sighed. You sound like your file said you would. Too idealistic for military service, it said. Better suited for diplomacy. I chose you for this program because I thought that idealism might be useful. I did not expect you to stake your career on it in the first 3 hours. What happens now? Daniel asked. Now you and Sarah are assigned adjacent quarters in the diplomatic wing. You will begin the formal exchange tomorrow. Classes in language, culture, history, joint projects, public appearances, and every moment, every interaction, will be watched and judged by dozens of species. Grant stood up. Do not make me regret trusting you, Lieutenant. I will not, Daniel promised. He left Grant's office and found his way to the diplomatic wing. The corridors here were quieter, designed for privacy. His assigned quarters were small but comfortable. A bed, a desk, a small bathroom. A window looked out at the stars. There was a door connecting his quarters to the next room. It was closed now, but he could hear movement on the other side. That was where Sarah lived. Daniel sat on his bed and wondered what he had gotten himself into. 3 months ago, he had been a soldier on Earth, fighting in confused skirmishes, as humanity tried to figure out its place in the galaxy. Now he was a diplomat who had just made a choice that might change everything or destroy everything. He was not sure which. A soft knock came from the connecting door. Daniel stood and opened it. Sarah stood in the doorway, still wearing her dark cloak. In the dim light of the corridor, she looked like a shadow given form. I wanted to thank you, she said. No one has chosen a Voidborn for this program before. No one has even tried. Why did you enter? Daniel asked. If you knew everyone would reject you? Sarah was quiet for a moment. My people are tired of being feared. We live in the dark spaces between stars because that is where we evolved. We are few in number, scattered across the galaxy. Young Voidborn like me want to know other species. We want to be part of the larger community. I volunteered knowing I would likely be rejected. I hoped that at least people would see us, that they would remember we exist, and we are more than the stories they tell about us. What stories do they tell? That we are mind readers who cannot be trusted. That we start wars because we know what enemies are planning. That we are cold and empty like the void itself. She looked down at her hands. Some of those stories are true. We can sense thoughts and emotions. Wars with Voidborn were terrible because we could anticipate strategies before they were spoken. But we did not start those wars. Others attacked us because they feared what we could do. Daniel thought about that. On Earth, we have a saying. People fear what they do not understand. And fear makes them dangerous. Your people understand that well, Sarah said. I have heard the stories about Earth. A death world with heavy gravity, extreme weather, and diseases that kill most species. Other civilizations call humans resilient but also aggressive. They fear you might be conquerors. We are not, Daniel said firmly. We have fought each other for thousands of years on Earth. We know what war costs. Now that we are in the galaxy, most humans just want to find our place and live in peace. That is what I sense from you, Sira said. Not aggression. Not deception. Just hope and determination. You can sense that? Yes. Emotions create electromagnetic patterns. Yours are very strong. Bright. Most humans are like that. You feel things deeply. She paused. It is not unpleasant. Different from other species, but not bad. They stood in the doorway for a moment, human and voidborn, two outsiders in a galaxy that feared them both. We should rest, Sira said finally. Tomorrow will be difficult. She was right. Daniel said goodnight and closed the door. But as he lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, he felt something he had not expected. He felt like he had made the right choice. The first week of the cultural exchange passed quickly. Daniel and Sira spent hours each day in study sessions, learning about each other's people. Daniel taught her about Earth, showing her images of oceans and mountains, cities and forests. He played music for her and was surprised when she said she could experience it two ways, both through sound and as electromagnetic patterns in the air. Sira taught him about the Voidborn. She explained that her people had no homeworld. They were born in space itself, in the dark matter regions and nebulae, where no other species could survive. They built communities on asteroids and derelict ships, moving slowly through the empty places of the galaxy. They were few in number, perhaps only a few 100,000 in total, scattered across vast distances. We are born in the cold and dark, she told him one afternoon as they sat in a study room. We do not need warmth or light the way you do. But we are not cold inside. We feel. We hope. We dream. We are just different. I am starting to understand that, Daniel said. They attended formal dinners with the other exchange pairs. Daniel met the partners of the other humans. Jake Morrison sat with his Kresh warrior, a tall female named Kral who spoke of honor and battle with fierce pride. Another human, a woman named Lisa Chen, had chosen the Symphonian and seemed enchanted by the musical culture. A fourth human had selected the Valerian and was already deep in discussions about trade agreements. But wherever Daniel and Sarah went, a space formed around them. Other aliens kept their distance. Conversations stopped when they approached. Eyes followed them wherever they moved. They are afraid, Sira said quietly during one dinner. I can sense it. Fear like electricity in the air. Let them be afraid, Daniel said. We are not doing anything wrong. But then the incidents began. The first happened on the 10th day. Secure data regarding Earth's defensive systems was accessed without authorization. The breach was discovered quickly, but whoever had done it left no clear trail. Security officers questioned everyone who had been near the secure systems. Sarah had been in that section of the station that day, attending a lecture on galactic history. The second incident happened 3 days later. Encrypted communications between Earth and the station were intercepted. Again, the security breach was discovered, but the source was unclear. Again, Sarah had been nearby. By the third incident, a pattern had formed. Every breach occurred when Sarah was in the area. And because Voidborn could sense and potentially manipulate electromagnetic systems, suspicion fell on her immediately. Security Chief Pavel Chen called both Daniel and Sarah to his office. He was a human, which made it worse somehow. One of their own people doubting her. Miss Sarah, Pavel said, his tone professional but cold. Can you explain your presence near 3 separate security breaches? I was attending classes and meetings, Sarah said. My schedule is public record. Anyone could see where I would be, and when. Pavel glanced at his correlation partner, a being named Elise, who stood silent by the wall. The evidence is circumstantial but concerning. Void-born abilities make you the most likely suspect. You could theoretically sense security systems and manipulate them without physical contact. I could, Sarah admitted, but I did not. I have no reason to steal human data. Then who did? Pavel asked. Someone who wants you to think I did, Sarah replied. Pavel looked unconvinced. He dismissed them but warned that the investigation would continue. As they left his office, Daniel could feel the stares of other security personnel following them. "They will never believe me," Sarah said quietly once they were alone in the corridor. "To them, my abilities make me guilty regardless of evidence." "Then we find real evidence," Daniel said. "We prove who actually did this." "How? You tell me." "Can you sense electromagnetic patterns that normal technology cannot?" Sarah looked at him carefully. "Yes. But using my abilities to investigate will make me look more suspicious. Or it will prove you are innocent," Daniel countered. "If you were guilty, you would hide your abilities. Using them openly to find the truth shows you have nothing to hide." They spent the next 2 days reviewing security footage and scanning the areas where the breaches occurred. Daniel used his diplomatic access to get them into restricted areas. Sarah used her unique senses to detect patterns that human technology missed. In the third location, near a communication relay, Sarah suddenly stopped. Her black eyes went distant, focused on something Daniel could not see. "There," she said softly. "Residual electromagnetic signature. Very faint, but it is not mine. Can you identify it? It is similar to mine, but not exact. Someone copied my pattern, not perfectly, but close enough to fool standard sensors." She moved slowly through the room, following traces invisible to human eyes. "The signature leads to the ventilation system. Someone small entered here." They followed the trail to a maintenance shaft. Inside, Daniel found a small device attached to the communication cables. It was sophisticated, designed to intercept and transmit data while leaving minimal traces. "Someone planted this," Daniel said. "Someone who could mimic your electromagnetic signature well enough to frame you." They took the device to Pavel Chen. The security chief examined it carefully, then called in technical experts. After an hour of analysis, one of the experts, a Tethian engineer, made a discovery. "This device contains organic components," the engineer said. "Specifically, cells capable of bioelectric mimicry. Only one species in the council has this natural ability." Pavel's expression hardened. "Correlations." Elis, who had been standing quiet in the corner the entire time, suddenly moved toward the door. Pavel blocked the way. "Explain yourself," Pavel demanded. Elis's skin shifted colors rapidly, a sign of distress. For a moment, it seemed the correlation would try to run. Then the shifting stopped, and Elis stood very still. "I was following orders," Elis said finally. "There are factions within my government who fear the alliance between humans and Voidborn. You are both from dangerous worlds. Together, you represent a threat to the balance of power in the Council. If I could prove the Voidborn could not be trusted, both your species would be discredited." "So you framed Sira," Daniel said, anger rising in his voice. "I made people see what they already believed," Elis replied. "Everyone already fears the Voidborn. I simply gave them a reason to act on that fear." Pavel ordered Elis taken into custody. Other security officers arrived and escorted the correlation away. The room was quiet after they left. "I apologize," Pavel said to Sarah. "I should have investigated more thoroughly before suspecting you. You believed what made sense based on what you knew," Sarah said. "That is not wrong. It is just incomplete." Pavel turned to Daniel. "How did you know to trust her?" "Because I watched her," Daniel said. "Not just what she could do, but what she chose to do. She helped someone who dropped tablets even though she knew they would fear her. She has been patient with everyone's suspicion. She has never lied or hidden what she is. That is not the behavior of someone with something to hide." They left the security office together. Word of Elise's arrest spread quickly through the station. By evening, everyone knew that Sarah had been framed, but the damage was done. Even with proof of her innocence, whispers followed her. Aliens still kept their distance. Some species openly questioned whether she should be allowed to remain in the exchange program. 2 days later, Ambassador Grant summoned Daniel to her office again. "The council is meeting to discuss Sarah's status," she said without preamble. "Several members are calling for her removal from the program. They argue that her presence, regardless of guilt in this specific case, creates security concerns. That is not fair, Daniel said. She was proven innocent. Fairness is not the issue. Politics is. Some council members see this as an opportunity to settle old grudges against the Voidborn. Others genuinely believe that beings with Sira's abilities should not have access to sensitive areas. What will you recommend? Daniel asked. Grant looked tired. I will recommend that we stand by council decision. Whatever it is. We cannot afford to alienate the other species over this. Even if it means abandoning someone who did nothing wrong? Even then, Grant said. Welcome to diplomacy, Lieutenant. Daniel left her office feeling sick. He found Sira in her quarters, standing at the window and looking out at the stars. They are going to remove me, she said without turning around. I can sense the electromagnetic activity in the council chambers. Lots of angry debates. I will not let them, Daniel said. You cannot stop them. You are one junior officer. They are the Galactic Council. Then I will resign, Daniel said. If they remove you. Sarah turned to look at him. That would destroy your career. I do not care. This is not about careers. This is about doing what is right. Why? Sira asked. Why would you sacrifice so much for me? You barely know me. Because someone has to, Daniel said simply. The galaxy will not change if everyone just accepts the way things are. Someone has to stand up and say this is wrong. If I do not do it, who will? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. You are very strange for a human. Most beings are motivated by self-interest. You seem motivated by principle. Is that strange? In this galaxy? Yes. The next day, Daniel made his decision public. He sent a formal message to the council and copied it to every major news network in the galaxy. The message was simple. If Sarah was removed from the cultural exchange program, he would resign from the diplomatic corps and return to Earth. The galaxy's response was immediate and divided. Some praised his courage. Others called him foolish. Earth's government sent urgent messages, demanding he reconsider. Ambassador Grant looked ready to strangle him. But Jake Morrison stood with him. So did 2 other humans in the exchange program. They sent their own messages supporting Daniel's stand. The council was forced to respond. They could remove Sira and lose several human diplomats, which would make them look weak and prejudiced. Or they could let her stay and face criticism from the species that feared her. Minister Vex called an emergency session. Daniel and Sarah were summoned to attend. As they walked through the station toward the council chambers, Sarah spoke quietly. Thank you. Whatever happens, thank you for seeing me as more than what others fear. I just see you, Daniel said. That is all. The council chamber doors opened. Inside, representatives from 30 civilizations waited to decide their fate. The council chamber was enormous, with seats rising in tiers around a central floor. Representatives from 30 civilizations sat in their designated areas, some speaking among themselves, others watching in silence as Daniel and Sarah entered. Minister Vex stood at the central podium. His multiple arms gestured for quiet. This emergency session addresses the status of Sira of the Voidborn in the Cultural Exchange Program. Lieutenant Carter of Earth has stated he will resign if she is removed. This creates a difficult situation. A correlation representative stood, skin-shifting, anxious colors. The security breach proved Voidborn abilities are dangerous. Even if this particular Voidborn was innocent, her presence creates risks we cannot ignore. She was framed, Daniel said, stepping forward before anyone could stop him. The investigation proved it. Punishing her for someone else's crime is not justice. This is not about punishment, said a tall Valerian. This is about practical security. Beings who can sense thoughts and manipulate electromagnetic systems cannot be given unrestricted access to sensitive areas. A younger member of the council stood. Daniel recognized her as Ambassador Lyra, a symphonian whose bioluminescent patterns glowed with calm blue light. Then we must ask ourselves what this program is truly for. Is it to bring species together, or only to bring together the species we already find comfortable? Comfort and security are not the same thing, Minister Vex replied. We must balance ideals with reality. The debate raged for an hour. Some argued for Sira's removal. Others defended her right to stay. Daniel remained standing on the chamber floor, Sira beside him, while their fate was argued by beings who had never spoken to either of them. Then a compromise was proposed. A Tethian scientist suggested that Sira could remain in the program if she agreed to wear a neural dampener, a device that would limit her ability to sense electromagnetic fields. It would not harm her, the scientist explained. It would simply reduce her sensory range. She would still be able to function normally, in most ways, except she would be blind, Daniel said sharply. You are asking her to disable her primary sense because it makes you uncomfortable. Would you ask a human to wear a blindfold? Would you ask a symphonian to dull their light? It is a reasonable compromise, Minister Vex said. It is discrimination dressed as compromise, Daniel countered. You are asking her to be less than she is so others can feel safe. Before anyone could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights flashed red. A voice spoke over the communication system in multiple languages, translated instantly. Spatial anomaly detected. All personnel to designated safe areas. This is not a drill. The council chamber erupted in controlled chaos. Representatives stood and moved toward exits. Minister Vex called for calm. Security officers appeared to guide people to shelters. Daniel grabbed Sira's arm. What kind of anomaly? She closed her black eyes, concentrating. A rift. In the space near the station. It is forming faster than the system predicted. 45 Her 45 IT. Cooled 45 Her 5I far. On the 5I 40 far. They followed the crowd to a safe area, a reinforced section deep in the station's core. Dozens of aliens packed into the space, speaking nervously in their various languages. Daniel found Ambassador Grant in the crowd. What is happening? He asked. Spatial rift, Grant said, checking a data tablet. They form sometimes in unstable regions of space. Usually they collapse harmlessly or drift away. But this one is growing fast, and it is close. The station's shields can handle the radiation, but we need to wait until it stabilizes or dissipates. Sarah suddenly went very still. Her eyes opened wide. There is something in the rift, she said. Daniel looked at her. What do you mean? A ship? Small. I can sense its electromagnetic signature. It is caught in the rift's gravitational field. Grant overheard. The sensors do not show any ship. My senses are different from your sensors, Sira said. There is a ship there. 4 life forms. 1 very small. A child. I think. Their distress beacon is being scrambled by the rift's interference. Your technology cannot differentiate the ship's signature from the background radiation. Grant immediately spoke into her communication device. This is Ambassador Grant. We may have a vessel caught in the rift. Requesting immediate sensor sweep. The response came back within minutes. Station command confirmed no ships were detected in the rift. The sensor chief explained that the electromagnetic interference made detailed scans impossible. If there was a ship there, standard technology could not confirm it. We only have her word, a security officer said, glancing at Sarah with obvious doubt. How long until the rift stabilizes? Daniel asked. 3 hours, Grant said, checking her tablet. Maybe 4. Any ship caught in there will not last that long. The radiation and gravitational stress will tear it apart within the hour. Then we need to go now, Daniel said. We need to attempt a rescue. Minister Vex had entered the safe area. He heard Daniel's words and shook his head. Based on what? The unconfirmed sensing of a voidborn? We cannot risk a rescue team on information that cannot be verified. Bola video. I'm undone. If she is right and we do nothing, those people die, Daniel said. If she is wrong and we send a team, we risk lives for nothing, Vex countered. I cannot authorize a rescue based on abilities we do not understand and cannot confirm. Then I volunteer, Daniel said. I will pilot the rescue shuttle myself. If she is wrong, only I am at risk. I volunteer too, said a voice from the crowd. Jake Morrison pushed forward. Another human pilot will improve chances of success. Kral, Jake's creche partner, stepped forward as well. I will go. My people do not abandon those in danger. Ambassador Grant looked at the volunteers, then at Minister Vex. Sir, 3 species are willing to risk this. Maybe that says something about the chance being worth taking. Vex was quiet for a long moment. The chamber waited. Finally, he spoke. If Lieutenant Carter is wrong, if there is no ship, this will prove that trusting void-born senses over proven technology is foolish. But if he is right, it will change everything. He looked at Daniel. You have authorization, but understand the consequences if you fail. Understood, Daniel said. They had only minutes to prepare. Daniel, Jake, and Kral rushed to the shuttle bay. Sarah came with them, insisting she needed to guide them through the rift. The shuttle was small, designed for short-range transport. Jake took weapons and shields. Kral managed the engineering systems. Daniel sat at the pilot controls. Sarah took the sensor station. I have never flown into a spatial rift before, Daniel admitted as they launched. No one has and lived to talk about it, Jake said. Try not to think about that too hard. They left the safety of the station and flew toward the rift. It looked like a wound in space itself. A twisting tier of darkness shot through with arcs of radiation. Normal sensors showed only chaos, but Sarah sat with her eyes closed, her hands moving over controls she was not actually touching. Left, she said suddenly. Gravitational surge coming from the left. Daniel veered right. 3 seconds later, sensors screamed a warning about the exact surge Sarah had predicted. If they had not moved, shields would have failed. How did you know? Jake asked. I sensed it, Sarah said simply. The electromagnetic fields change before the physical effect reaches you. Follow my directions exactly. Do not hesitate. They flew deeper into the rift. Daniel followed every instruction Sarah gave, trusting her completely even when her direction seemed wrong. Dodge left. Boost shields. Drop lower. Speed up. Slow down. Each command came seconds before sensors confirmed why it was necessary. There, Sarah said finally. The ship. Do you see it? On the visual display, a small vessel tumbled through the chaos. It was badly damaged, hull breached in 2 places. Shields flickering. Daniel's heart sank. They might already be too late. Life signs, he asked. Kral checked the readings now that they were close enough for standard sensors to work. 4 beings. All alive. Barely. Their life support is failing. Daniel maneuvered the shuttle closer to the tumbling ship. Matching velocity with a spinning vessel in a spatial rift was like trying to thread a needle during an earthquake. Sweat dripped down his face. His hands moved across controls by instinct and training. Massive radiation surge, Sarah said, her voice sharp with warning. From the rift's core. Impact in 10 seconds. Shields cannot handle it, Kral reported. 9 seconds. Sarah counted. Veer down and left. Now. Daniel obeyed without question. The shuttle dropped and turned. The radiation wave passed so close that the shields glowed bright white. Alarms screamed. Then the wave was past and shields held. How did you see that coming? Jake demanded. Electromagnetic precursors, Sarah said. Your sensors detect the wave when it reaches you. I sense the field changes that precede it. They managed to dock with the damaged ship. Kral and Jake went across to extract the crew. Daniel held the shuttle steady, fighting against the rift's gravitational turbulence. Sarah continued calling out warnings about approaching hazards. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, Jake's voice came over the communication system. We have them. 4 survivors. Moving to shuttle now. Daniel saw them through the airlock camera. 3 adult aliens of different species, and 1 small symphonian child. The child's bioluminescent patterns flickered weakly, showing distress. Everyone secure, Kral confirmed. We need to leave. Now. Getting out proved harder than getting in. The rift was collapsing, creating gravitational whirlpools and radiation storms. Standard navigation showed a dozen paths, all of them ending in certain death. Sira, Daniel said, I need you. She opened her black eyes and looked at him. I will guide you. But you must trust me completely. Some of the paths I show you will look impossible. I trust you, Daniel said. She began calling directions. Left through a narrow gap between gravitational fields. Down beneath a radiation surge. Speed up into what looked like solid interference but was actually a pocket of stable space. Each instruction seemed insane. Each one was exactly right. They threaded through the collapsing rift like a needle through cloth, following paths only Sarah could sense. Behind them, the rift collapsed completely, becoming a point of brilliant light, and then nothing. They emerged into normal space. The station appeared ahead, safe and solid. Alarms finally stopped blaring. The shuttle's systems returned to normal operation. Jake laughed, the sound slightly hysterical. We did it. We actually did it. Kral made a sound that might have been her species' version of a relieved sigh. Daniel looked at Sarah. She was slumped in her seat, exhausted from the effort of guiding them. Thank you, he said quietly. She met his eyes. Thank you for trusting me. They docked with the station. Medical teams rushed to help the rescued crew. The small Symphonian child was crying, her patterns flashing distress colors. She saw Sarah, and, despite her species' natural fear of Voidborn, reached out toward her. Sarah knelt down and spoke softly. Her voice carried harmonic frequencies that seemed to soothe the child. The flashing patterns slowly stabilized. Minister Vex was waiting in the docking bay. He watched the rescue team emerge. He saw the 4 survivors being rushed to medical care. He looked at Sarah, at Daniel, at the small shuttle that should not have survived. I was wrong, Vex said quietly. I apologize. Around them, dozens of aliens had gathered to watch. News of the rescue was already spreading through the station and beyond. The medical bay was busy with activity. Doctors from 3 different species worked to stabilize the rescued crew. The adult survivors were exhausted and injured but alive. The Symphonian child, a young girl no more than 5 years old by human standards, was the most distressed. Her patterns kept flashing between fear and relief. Daniel watched from the observation window as Sarah stayed with the child. She had refused to leave, saying the child's electromagnetic patterns showed deep trauma. Somehow, Sarah's presence seemed to calm her when nothing else worked. Ambassador Grant appeared beside Daniel. She was quiet for a long moment, watching the scene below. That was either the bravest or most reckless thing I have ever seen, she said finally. I am not sure there is a difference sometimes, Daniel replied. The council is convening again. Minister Vex wants to address what happened. I think you should be there. They walked to the council chamber together. Word of the rescue had spread through the entire station. Aliens they passed in the corridors watched them with new expressions. Not fear. Not suspicion. Something closer to respect. The chamber was full when they arrived. Every representative was present, and many had brought additional staff. This was clearly more than a routine session. Minister Vex stood at the podium. His multiple arms were still, a sign of serious thought among his species. We gather to discuss the events of the past hours, he began. A spatial rift threatened our station. In that rift, a ship was trapped. Standard sensors could not detect it, but Sira of the Voidborn could. She sensed what our technology could not. Because of her abilities, and because Lieutenant Daniel Carter trusted those abilities, 4 lives were saved. He paused, looking around the chamber. I was among those who questioned whether Voidborn should be allowed full participation in council affairs. I believed their abilities made them too dangerous, too unpredictable. Today proved I was wrong. Not because Voidborn abilities are not powerful, but because power is not the same as danger. How that power is used defines whether it helps or harms. A Valerian representative stood. The rescue was impressive. But one good action does not erase centuries of fear and conflict. No. Vex agreed. but it can be the beginning of change. We have kept the Voidborn isolated because we feared what they could do. We wrote treaties restricting their movements. We excluded them from diplomatic programs. We told ourselves it was for security, but really it was because we did not want to face our own fear. Ambassador Lyra, the Symphonian, rose from her seat. Her patterns glowed with warm colors. My niece was on that ship. She is the child you saw in the medical bay. Without Sira's help, I would have lost her. Without Lieutenant Carter's courage to trust what he could not verify with technology, I would have lost her. How can I fear the beings who saved my family? Other representatives began to speak. Some still expressed concern, but more spoke of the need to reconsider old assumptions. The tide had shifted. A message arrived from the Voidborn Collective, transmitted from deep space, where their main communities existed. It was brief but significant. The Voidborn thanked the Council for allowing Sira to participate in the exchange. They expressed hope that this might be the beginning of a new relationship between their scattered people and the wider galactic community. Minister Vex called for a formal vote. I propose that the Voidborn be granted full diplomatic status with all rights and privileges. I propose that all restrictive treaties be reviewed and revised. I propose that we formally apologize for centuries of exclusion based on fear rather than fact. The vote was not unanimous. Some species abstained. A few voted against. But the majority voted in favor. The resolution passed. The chamber erupted in conversation. Daniel felt the weight of the moment settle over him. One choice. One person trusted when everyone said not to. And now, the galaxy was changing. Ambassador Grant touched his arm. Come. There is someone who wants to thank you. They went to the medical bay. The rescued crew had been stabilized and moved to recovery rooms. In one room, a Symphonian woman sat beside the young girl they had saved. The woman's patterns glowed with gratitude. I am Lyra's sister, the woman said. This is my daughter, Nina. You saved her life. Nina looked at Daniel with large eyes. Her patterns had stabilized into calm blues and greens. When Sira entered the room, Nina's patterns shifted to include a new color. Something deep purple that Daniel had not seen before. What does that color mean? He asked. Lyra's sister smiled. It means friend in darkness. It is a color we use for those who help us when we are afraid. She has created it for Sarah. We will remember this always. Sarah knelt beside the child's bed. Nina reached out and touched her hand, no longer afraid of the dark skin and black eyes. Thank you, Nina said in a small voice. You are welcome, Sarah replied gently. That evening, a formal ceremony was held. Daniel and Sira stood together in the Great Hall where, weeks before, he had chosen her from among 7 candidates. Now the hall was filled with representatives from across the galaxy, all gathered to acknowledge what had happened. Minister Vex presented them both with medals of honor. For courage in the face of danger, and for showing us that trust can be stronger than fear. Jake Morrison and Kral stood with them, also receiving recognition. The 4 of them, Human, Kresh, and Voidborn, represented something new. A team that should not have worked, but did. Species that were feared, working together to save lives. After the ceremony, as the crowds dispersed, Ambassador Grant pulled Daniel aside one final time. The Council has created a new position, she said. Ambassador of Integration. Someone to work with species that have been isolated or excluded, helping them find their place in the galactic community. They want you for the role. Daniel looked at her in surprise. Me? I am just a lieutenant. You were a lieutenant. This position comes with a promotion and a mandate directly from the Council. You will have resources, staff, and authority to make real changes. They want Sira as your official advisor. It seems the galaxy has decided that the human who chose the feared Voidborn should be the one to help others who are feared find acceptance. Daniel looked across the hall to where Sira stood, speaking quietly with other Voidborn who had arrived for the ceremony. 3 others like her. Dark and strange and powerful. They had come because one of their own had been accepted. They had come because the galaxy had finally opened a door that had been closed for too long. "I accept," Daniel said. A month later, Daniel stood in his new office. It was larger than his old quarters, with windows overlooking the station and the stars beyond. His door was open, as he always kept it. Anyone could enter. Anyone could ask for help. Sarah worked at a desk beside his. They had spent weeks developing plans for outreach to isolated species. The Voidborn were first. But there were others. Species that lived in extreme environments. Species with abilities others feared. Species that had been pushed to the edges of the galaxy and told they did not belong. Nina visited sometimes, bringing drawings she made of the rescue. Her parents had become advocates for the integration program, speaking about how prejudice almost cost them their daughter. Jake Morrison stopped by one afternoon. He and Kral had decided to continue working together even after the exchange program ended. They were developing a training program to teach mixed species teams how to work effectively together. "You started something," Jake said, leaning against the doorway. "That day you chose Syrah. You changed more than you knew." "I just made a choice," Daniel said. "You made the right choice," Jake corrected. "There is a difference." That evening, Daniel and Syrah stood at the observation window in his office, watching ships come and go from the station. Trade vessels, diplomatic ships, exploration craft. The galaxy continued turning, but it turned a little differently now. "Do you regret it?" Syrah asked. "Your life was simpler before you chose me." "Simpler is not the same as better," Daniel said. "Before, I was a soldier, then a junior diplomat doing what I was told. Now I am helping to change how the galaxy works. I am helping species find acceptance. I am making a real difference." "Because you chose the one they feared most," Sarah said softly. "No," Daniel said. "Because I chose to see past the fear to the person beneath it. That is what made the difference." Syrah was quiet for a moment. "I can sense your emotions. You know that. Right now, you feel pride, satisfaction, and hope, but also worry. You are concerned this is just the beginning and there is still so much to change." "Is that wrong?" Daniel asked. "No. It is realistic. Change is hard. There will be setbacks. Some species will resist. Some will never fully accept the Voidborn, or others like us. But you are right to feel hope too, because for the first time in my life, I believe my people have a future in this galaxy. Not hiding in the dark, not feared and avoided, but as part of something larger." 3 Voidborn walked past the office door, heading to a council meeting. A month ago, they would not have been allowed in this section of the station. Now they walked freely, their presence no longer causing panic. A Symphonian child ran past, chasing a floating toy. She waved at Syrah as she passed. Syrah waved back. Small changes, small acceptances. But they added up. Daniel's communication device chimed. A new request had come in. A species from the Outer Rim, isolated for decades because their natural biology made other species uncomfortable. They had heard about the integration program. They wanted to talk. They wanted a chance. Daniel looked at Sarah. "Ready for the next one?" She met his eyes, those black eyes that had once made everyone afraid. Now, when he looked at them, he just saw his friend and partner. "Always," she said. They turned back to the window, looking out at the galaxy. Somewhere out there, other species waited in isolation, wondering if they would ever belong. Other people stood on the edges, feared for what they could do rather than judged for who they were. But things were changing. One choice at a time. One act of courage at a time. One person willing to extend trust when everyone else extended fear. Daniel Carter had been told to choose one alien girl from 7 candidates. He had chosen the one they feared most. In doing so, he had not just changed her life or his own. He had changed the galaxy's future. And that future, he thought as he watched the stars, looked brighter than it had before. In the medical bay, Nina played with toys while her mother watched. Her bioluminescent patterns included that new purple color, the one that meant friend in darkness. It was spreading. Other young symphonians had started using it, creating a new word in their visual language. In the council chambers, Minister Vex reviewed proposals for the next cultural exchange. Applications had doubled. Species that once avoided the program now competed to participate. The message had been received. Different was not the same as dangerous. In the dark spaces between stars, void-born communities received messages from their children on the station. For the first time in generations, young void-born had hope that they could be part of the larger galaxy. That they could walk in the light as well as the darkness. That they could be seen as people, not threats. And in a small office overlooking the diplomatic station, a human and a void-born worked side by side, planning the next steps of a journey that had begun with one simple, courageous choice. The galaxy was vast. Change would be slow. But it had begun. And it had begun because one person chose to see past fear to the truth underneath. That truth was simple. Everyone deserves a chance to be accepted for who they are, not feared for what others imagine they might be. Daniel looked at Sarah, and she looked back at him. No words were needed. They both understood what they had started and what still needed to be done. The work would never truly be finished. There would always be new challenges, new prejudices to overcome, new species needing help finding their place, but they would face it together. The human from the death world and the void-born from the dark spaces. Two outsiders who had found each other and, in doing so, had shown the galaxy what was possible when courage replaced fear. The stars shone beyond the window, cold and distant. But inside the office, there was warmth. There was hope. There was friendship that crossed the boundaries of species and expectation. And there was the knowledge that one choice, made with courage and compassion, could echo across the galaxy and change everything. That was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything.